My name is Veronica Parker with AEBG TAP, and thank you for joining today's webinar, NOVA Expense Reporting for AEBG. Just to go over a few things, as you all know, please be sure to post any questions you may have in the chat pod. We'll be sure to address these questions throughout the webinar. In addition, the PowerPoint was sent out via email earlier this morning. If you did not receive the PowerPoint, you are more than welcome to download it in the resource pod. So down in the left-hand corner of your screen, you'll click on the file and then select download, and the file will appear on your screen. The webinar is being recorded this afternoon, so if you have to leave for any reason or you would like to come back and refer to this webinar, it will be available on the AEBG website later on this afternoon for your convenience. If you are experiencing any technical issues, please be sure to let us know by typing in the chat pod, and we will start a private chat with you and resolve any issues. If you are hearing an echo as I am speaking at this time, it could be because you are logged in more than once. You will know this by a number 2 being next to your name. This is an indication that you are logged in more than once, and you may be experiencing a little interference with your sound. If this is the case, please be sure to exit out of Adobe Connect and come back in, and it should resolve itself. At the end of this webinar, there will be an evaluation that will appear on your screen. Please be sure to fill out this evaluation. It's our way of getting your feedback on what you felt about this webinar, if there are any areas of improvement, and to provide any technical assistance or professional advice that you may have. So now I will turn it over to Neil Kelly of the AEBG office. Neil?
Thank you, Veronica. Welcome, everyone. I guess people are coming on right now. We've got a lot of, I don't want to say remote areas, but we have a lot of smaller school districts on, which is great to see. And so we welcome you, and hopefully we'll make it worth your while today. We are going to add a special annual plan feature. So we're going to go through the annual plan. That won't be available in NOVA for a little bit longer, but at least you'll get to see what we're going to require for the annual plan due August 15th. So that's an extra bonus today, and hopefully you'll enjoy that. Let's see. So we got about 75 people. Let's go forward and look at the agenda. Feel free to type in the chat. We have Nicole Alexander from the AEBG office and Ryan French from Product Ops here to assist. Nicole is going to be going through some screenshots again. She'll also be covering some kind of FAQs on the CFAD with some screenshots. So we've come across a few issues that people are having trouble with. So we'll kind of go into those in a little depth up front, and then we'll talk about kind of the allocation amendments and budget changes, and then talk about expense reporting, and then closing out, get into the annual plan, and then talk a little bit about the 3-year plan. So you get everything today. Not just the expense reporting, you get it all. So let us begin and look at the agenda. So like I said, we're going to look over the CFAD, answer any questions, because it's due May 2nd, so today's the 20th, so 12 days away, and hopefully everybody's signing off on that or certifying it, and no problems. And we'll talk a little bit about allocation amendments because we covered that last one. We'll take a little deeper dive on the expense reporting. I'll go over the targets as well because there seems to be questions coming up on that. And then we'll talk about annual plans, 3-year plans. If we have any other extra time, we'll open it up for additional questions that we haven't answered. Okay, so let's start with, this is really quick. I covered this last week. So just so you understand, because we're getting questions like, oh, can I have an extension past May 2nd? We're not going to have enough time. So I wanted to show you the allocation process and why we can't give any extensions. So we're in April, soon to be May. And so the reason the CFADs are due May 2nd is because we work on, in May, the interagency agreement. And that's putting the schedules together to send money over to CDE so they can send it out to the K-12 and county offices. And then we send another schedule to the chancellor's office so they can send money to the colleges, whether it's a K-12 or college fiscal agent, or if you're direct funded directly to the school district. So those get to put together in June. And then there has to be a sign-off process in contracts at the respective agency. So all that takes a lot of time. And so we try to get a head start on that. So when the governor signs it July 1, and then we take it to the Board of Governors, maybe like the third week of July, it's all ready to go. So once the Board of Governors signs in the third week of July at their July board meeting, then we can send those schedules to controllers and get the proper paperwork. So as you can see, we don't really have any wiggle room because we have a 45-day requirement after July 1st to get those schedules to controllers. So if we gave everybody extra time, it just would upset our timetable and you wouldn't get your money and we'd violate the legislation. So that's kind of explaining that question. All right, and then just quickly going over the CFAD criteria. Like I said, 45 days after the governor signs a budget, we got to get the money out. The CFAD is a once a year process due May 2nd. So if you said, oh, I want to revise my CFAD, you really want to do an allocation amendment. You don't really want to revise your CFAD because we won't allow you. So the CFAD stays as it is when it's submitted by May 2nd. We keep that frozen because then we can go back to it next year to look at prior year allocations. So like it says in those last two bullets, the CFAD is used by state AEBG office to document prior year allocations, and the CFAD is also used to set up funding disbursements to direct funded and fiscal agent consortia. So that kind of explains the criteria. We covered that last week, and you know the timetable. Now, if you don't get it to us May 2nd, we'll just use prior year allocation percentages. So if you had 4 members and everybody got 25% last year, we do the same thing this year, 25% including the COLA, and everybody would get that same amount. But it would be nice for you to get this to us on time and sign rather than us forcing the issue and just going with the percentages. We'll still follow up with you to get that CFAD turned in. But for the reasons that I listed in the past slide, we've got to get those disbursement schedules created. So that's why we'll use that percentage. Okay, and let's see. CFAD processing. So we had a few questions on this. So for the most part, everybody's doing across the board COLA. Everybody gets the same amount as last year and the same percentage split of the COLA. Now, a small amount of consortia are saying, you know, we're all in agreement. We're looking at the amounts, and you know, we have a need in this community, so we're going to give this member a little bit more because they're expanding, or we got a new member, so we want to fund that new member, and we're going to use the carryover for that. Or somebody said they couldn't spend their carryover. I mean, they're going to use the COLA for that. And then somebody, a member has too much carryover, so they can't accept the COLA. So all these things could be discussed, but you have to have all members in agreement. You can't do a vote, or you can't. I heard one person say, well, we've got 2 members abstaining, and so is that okay that we can take them off the CFAD? And I said, no, they have to sign. So people are trying to work through this and do some workarounds, but you can't do it. So you either have to have everybody sign it to agree, and if they don't sign it, then we'll just use last year's percentages. So let's pause there for questions, because I think we head off the CFAD, or I go into questions anyway. So any questions about the CFAD? Are you having trouble getting agreement? Are you perplexed by the decision making around the allocations? Let's see if anybody has any questions. Do they have to sign the CFAD or push the button in Nova? So Jessica, it's just pushing the button in Nova. And so what'll happen is that member will get an email from Nova saying once I think the primary, and Nicole and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, once that is sent out, there'll be an email notification saying, hey, you got a document that you need to sign off on, and then they just have to push the button, so you don't have to get physical wet signatures anymore. And then Chair said, did you say that if a member has high carry, they can't use COLA? No, I didn't say that. So, so you have to work that out. If someone has massive amounts of carryover, they're going to get hit by the target spending threshold anyway, and they'll have to do a corrective action plan. Then we'll cover that in a few more slides. But that has no bearing on the COLA. Now, that could lead to them being an ineffective member, but that requires a process where you have to contact the state, and then we set up technical assistance. AEBG TAPS works with those members that aren't meeting the spending targets, and then we have to see how they do with the technical assistance. And after several attempts, if it doesn't work and they still are falling behind, then with all that documentation, you can reduce funds. But until that, you have to go through the process. So no, you can't restrict the COLA if they have a high carryover. So Jose says, or Josie says, when will NOVA open a window of time to do any budget revisions? I think Nicole's going to cover that in just a little bit. And Nicole covered that. All right. So let's go to this slide. It says CFAD deliverables. So, of course, you'll create an allocation chart or distribution of funds for each member. And then some people haven't been filling this out. So they've been clicking the no changes box. So if your prior year allocation, and you can see it right on the screen, is different than this year's allocation, and for all 455 members in the state, it will be different because you're getting a different amount, or at least somebody's getting a different amount because of the COLA. So you will have to fill out the change box. And we would like to see, yes, our allocation changed from the prior year because we received a COLA. We made the decision to equally split the COLA among all members based on the percentages from last year, or we decided to fund a new member with our COLA, and that decision was agreed upon by membership, something like that. But you have to fill out that change box because everyone's allocation has changed because you got more money. And then, of course, you designate what's your fiscal structure, whether it's a fiscal agent or direct funded, or you can tell us if you changed fiscal agents, but you kept the fiscal agent structure, but you just changed fiscal agents, or if you went to the completely different direct funded structure. So, any questions? Here's some, let's see if we can stimulate some questions here. What happens if we miss the May 2nd deadline? And the answer is, the state will use prior year CFAD allocations, in the case of the COLAs, a proportional percentage. So we kind of talked about that. Can a member abstain from signing the CFAD? No. If all members do not sign, it's incomplete. And see the first question, we go use the prior year percentages. Can we outvote a member that doesn't want to go along with a different allocation object? No. Decision-making bylaws do not apply to CFAD processes. AB 104 legislation is clear on prior year funding. Can we get an extension? No. See timeline and requirements to send money out. So we've been getting a lot of questions like this, and most of the questions are no. But, it's worth trying. So any additional questions? And I'm going to bring Nicole in to kind of go over some of the troubleshooting she's been doing in NOVA with everyone. Nicole, are you on the line?
Yes, I am, Neil. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being on today. For today's webinar, we're going to focus on troubleshooting a few issues that have come up with the CFAD process, as we don't really have the time to go through the full submission process. But if you need information related to the full submission process, please access the recorded webinar from April 6th, which is located on the AEBG website. So we're going to show some screenshots right now. Just want to remind you that if you want to have a better view of the screenshots to change your view to full screen, when you do change it to full screen, you will lose access to the chat box. So just wanted to mention that. So this screen shows the CFAD fiscal declaration section, and this is what Neil was referring to as far as the narrative requirements and the completion of the change box. And we just want to remind you that as you are completing this section, you are required to enter an explanation in the changes box as to the rationale behind how the COLA was distributed, as well as any other changes that occurred, such as disbursement method or allocation changes. And so this is the section right here. We have had some instances where some folks have checked the box for no changes, but because of the COLA this year, everyone will have a change in allocations and will have to explain the rationale behind how that was distributed. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so then the other issue that we've come across is adding and removing member agencies. This screen shows how you can add a member agency if it's necessary. I'll go through the steps on how to do so, and then I'll also talk a little bit about some of the issues that we've experienced. So to do so, you would click on the Agencies and Certifiers section of the CFAD and scroll down to the bottom of the page. And this is what's shown here on this screen. And on the lower right side of the screen, you will see a button titled Add Member Agency. And once you click on this button, drop-down menus will appear requesting information related to the agency you are adding. So you will need to indicate the member type, whether it's a K-12 or a community college district, and as well as type in the name of the institution. There is a drop-down window under the naming the member institution. If the institution does not appear, then you can type it in. So as you are going through the CFAD process, if you inadvertently removed a member agency, you can follow this process to add them back. However, you will also need to add back their member representatives. So if you've deleted a member in this section inadvertently, when you add them back, it kind of removes all of their attached information. So when you add them back in, you will also have to add back the member representatives that will need to certify or approve the CFAD. And also just a quick note about the approval flow and the locking down of the CFAD. Changes can be made throughout the CFAD up until the time that it is submitted. If you need to make a change after it has been submitted by the consortia lead, but not yet approved by all of the members, you'll need to request that one of your member representatives reject the CFAD so that it can be reopened for edits. So that's the process to get it opened back up if you're still at the submission step. However, if the CFAD has been member approved, meaning that it's gone through the second approval submission and approval step, then you'll need to contact the AEBG office for assistance, and we can get that unlocked for you. And right now we're currently developing that function, and I know I have a few of you that's contacted me to unlock it, and so we're working on that, and hopefully we'll have that fixed soon, and I'll circle back with you to get those unlocked. So those are kind of the two big issues that have come up during the CFAD, but I just wanted to pause right here before we move on to see if there are any other questions regarding the CFAD submission and approval process.
So Nicole, there's a question from Marianne. Will we be able to check the CFAD to make sure that all members have signed? So how do you check that?
Yes, okay. So your CFAD will not be considered as officially submitted until all members have clicked on the approval button. And the way you can check that is by logging into ANOVA, navigating to the CFAD section, and on the preview tab, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the screen, it shows all of the member agencies and their status as far as whether they've approved or rejected, or if you need to send them a reminder.
So that reminder, the primary can just click a button and it reminds them that you haven't signed your CFAD. Oh, great.
If you're a primary contact, when you log in and you go to the preview screen, if someone has not either accepted or rejected the CFAD, there's a button that'll say send reminder, and that'll send them another email reminder that they need to log in and review and approve the CFAD.
Great. So Joan Patrick asked, she couldn't access to approve and found out she had to change her browsers. Is there a certain browser that works better than others, Nicole?
Yes, so the Chrome browser is the most compatible browser with Nova. We have experienced some issues with Internet Explorer. So I would recommend when you're accessing Nova to try to use the Chrome browser.
Okay. And then Ryan also added, once all members have approved the CFAD, an email will be sent to all parties explaining the CFAD is fully certified.
Oh, yeah, great. Thanks, Ryan, for clarifying that.
Okay. Nicole, anything else before I kind of go over a couple of slides and then bring you back in?
That's all that I have on the CFAD, and unless there aren't any other questions, I think we can move into the allocation amendments.
Okay, last call for CFAD. Anybody? I don't see anybody typing. Looks like it's Crystal, and everybody's going to get their CFAD in by May 2nd. No problem. Oh, great. This is fantastic. All right, allocation amendments. I just have a couple of slides, and Nicole's going to go over this a little bit. So first of all, remember, it's a separate process, the allocation amendment process. The CFAD process tells us what the allocations are, and that's submitted by May 2nd. Then you go over to the allocation amendment process if you want to change that. And so that's the allocation amendment process for that fiscal year. So the AEBG member allocation can be amended after the CFAD is submitted, and the consortia can adjust throughout the year based on member activities, carryover, regional need, etc., with consent of its membership. So you're not really changing the CFAD, you're just changing your allocations, because throughout the year things change, and we understand that. But that's not going to change. So if we go to next year and we're looking at prior year, we'll go back to the CFAD. We won't go back to your latest allocation amendment that you did, 3 days prior or something like that. We'll go back to May 2nd of the prior year and look at your CFAD. And of course, the second bullet just backs that up. These adjustments that you make in the allocation amendments do not impact or change the CFAD, as the CFAD is a one-time, once-a-year process, and the adjustments do not affect the prior year allocations by the member if we are looking at prior year allocations to settle a dispute if you couldn't get your CFAD in on time. Let's see. And then just remember, if you're direct funded, because the way the disbursement schedule works, so when we get those schedules to controllers in August, and controller sets up their schedule to send it to the county offices and then to the district for direct funded, those are scheduled August to June, 11 installments, and so we can't stop that. So let's say in January you're direct funded, but you realize you want to move some money around, the consortium made a decision. You can still do the allocation amendment process, but you're going to have to transfer the money. You're going to have to send a check over to that other member and work out how you move the money around. And then you document that in Nova through the allocation amendment process, but the physical movement of the money has to be done behind the scenes with the various members. Now, whether that's sending a check or transfer, you have to work that out, and how the district's going to receive that money and send it. So these are kind of the details you have to work out. Okay. So Kathy asked, amendments are for the 1 year only, right? Yeah, so the amendments would be effective between July 1 and June 30th. It's because our budgets are the 12-month fiscal year cycle. And so once June 30th comes around, then we start planning for the next year. We bring in the carryover, any carryover, and we get the new funding, and we create a brand new budget. And you can start, based on the CFAD, but then you can start doing your allocation amendments for that period as well. So yes, it's just a 1 year budget, but it involves all active funding, which could be, so like for this coming year, you'll have 18-19 new funding, you'll have 17-18 carryover, and some of you who might get a little slap on the wrist could have some 16-17 money that you need to spend down in the next 6 months. So you're juggling 3 years worth of money, but it's all based on a 12-month budget, July 1 to June 30th. Okay. Let's pause there for a second to see if we have any questions before Nicole comes back on. Emma's typing a question. She says, for consortia with fiscal agents that hold funding for a group activity, will NOVA be indicating a separate line for what belongs to the member as opposed to the fiscal agent before the expense reporting is due? This will impact totals and thresholds to be spent. I'm going to cover that in a little bit, but we don't have that available right now. Ryan, we're kind of working on that, but I don't think it's going to be ready for the 17-18 reporting year. Is that correct?
Sorry, I was on mute.
We'll see if Ryan's. Oh,
Yep.
Go
Can
ahead.
you hear me? Yeah. Yes, Neil, what you said is
Yes.
correct. So we are working on the ability to manage consortia or shared expenses, but we won't have that immediately.
Right. And regarding the thresholds, if you're not meeting your threshold percentages, and that's a result of the consortia fundings that you're holding, you can put that in the explanation, and we will work with you on that. And so you don't get a kind of a ding or a corrective action. We'll understand that this is a consortia issue, not a member issue. So we can work with you on that. All right, so Nicole, show us the magic of the allocation amendments.
Okay. Thank you, Neil. Okay, so in a few weeks, by the end of April, we're going to be launching in NOVA the ability to make budget revisions, allocation amendments, and with that is going to come some updated navigation. So before we show the allocation amendments function, I did want to spend a little bit of time and go over some of the navigation changes that will also be coming in a few weeks at the end of April. So the navigation updates, and so once you log in and select AEBG under Funds, you'll be directed to the main consortium dashboard, which will now be labeled Consortia and Members. And from here, you can scroll through the list to find your consortium or use the filters at the top of the screen. The filters are smart filters too, so as you start typing in the name of your consortia, it'll automatically pull it up, which is nice. So then I'm going to move into this next slide here. You can also navigate directly to your consortium's member agency pages from the screen by clicking on the arrow located next to the name of your consortia. And so this screen right here shows links to the Allen Hancock Consortium and their member agencies. And so you can click here to go directly to your member page. You no longer have to go through the consortium main page to then navigate to the member page if you're a member agency. So hopefully that streamlines things a bit and kind of makes it a little bit less of clicks, the number of clicks as you try to navigate to what you need to do in NOVA. And so once you click on the link for your consortia from the main dashboard, you will be directed to the main consortia page. And this page is where you can update consortia level information, such as contacts and allocations, and where consortia level documents are housed. And this screenshot shows what that looks like. I have a couple of screenshots for the main consortia page because it's now kind of a long scroll. It's a longer page and you kind of scroll through, so it's all in one place. So as you scroll through your consortium's main page, you will see the document repository for the CFADs, annual plans, and any other supporting documents. And you'll notice with this update that the documents are now separated by type and will hopefully make them easier to locate. Previously, all of the documents were kind of grouped together. So hopefully this streamlines things a little bit. And we're still on the main consortia page here. And as you continue to scroll, you will find a list of the member agency pages and the allocation section. And the allocation section is where you will click to complete your allocation amendments. And we're going to go through that process shortly, but I just wanted to continue with the navigation view in just in these next few slides. And this screenshot shows the scroll through to the bottom of the main consortia page where the member budgets and work plans can be accessed. Okay, and then once you, if you navigate to the member agency page, whether from the main consortia dashboard or through the main consortia page, this is what the member agency page looks like. And this is where member level contacts can be updated and member work plans and budgets can be accessed. Okay, so now moving into allocation amendments. So I showed you the area where you would access the allocation amendments from the main consortia page. To change your consortia allocations, you would navigate to this section and you would click on the link that says, click here to amend members' allocations. And so it's right below the text that says allocations. This is a hyperlink that'll take you to the next page. And once you click on that link, you'll be directed to this page, which will allow you to update your 17-18 allocations. And once you do that, you click Save. Once you click Save, the affected member budgets will automatically be open to complete budget revisions based on the changes. And so we'll go over how to complete a budget revision in NOVA in a minute, but I believe first Neil has some information to share regarding expense reporting. And before we move into that, I'll check to see if there are any questions.
I think we're caught up on the questions. There was okay. So Ryan is explaining once we figure out so Ryan, the comment that you made about, let me scroll up just a second. Shared expenses will be identified in the budgeting. There will be a checkbox to identify the budget item as consortia fiscal and admin expense. When will can they do that now, or will that become effective next year?
No, that's a future request. So it won't be available at the launch of fiscal reporting. This would be a change to the planning and budgeting piece, the work plan and budgeting piece, but it won't be too far out.
So
I can give you an updated date. I don't want to do
so
that
maybe it'll be available for 18, 19 in the fall or something?
Yeah. Yeah, that's reasonable.
All right. So in the meanwhile, so there's questions about people like, do I physically hold the money if I'm holding consortia funds? So somebody has to physically hold the money. So if you're direct funded, you guys have to make a decision to say, I'm going to hold the money, or these 3 members are going to hold the money. Or if you have a fiscal agent, that fiscal agent member will hold the money for the consortia level activities. So you have to make it's a physical decision. Somebody has to hold on to that. The state's not going to hold on to it. We have to disperse all this money out. And we have to do it in 11 installments through the controllers. And it has to be done between August and June. We have to give those schedules to the controllers by August. So you have to figure out who you want to hold that. And that's where the CFAD is important if you're direct funded, because you have to determine which member is going to hold that money. Now, if you have a fiscal agent, you can just say, well, the fiscal agent's going to hold it. We'll move it around. We'll do allocation amendments throughout the year. But with direct funded, someone's going to get that money on a regular basis from controllers through the county office. So you have to be ready for that and account for that. Let's see. They do have a Neil. Do you consider consortium expenses part of the member budget? Yes. They have to be part of your member budget for now. And like I said, if you're having trouble meeting those thresholds and you're holding consortium money, we can have a conversation about, okay, so it is the consortium expenses or the lack of expenses that's dragging your expenditures down. And then that can be part of that corrective action discussion. And maybe that member doesn't take responsibility for that because it's a consortium or a wide situation rather than an individual member situation. So we'll deal with that on a case-by-case basis. I don't think we're going to have that many problems. And then let's see. Does changes to allocations require member signatures all over again to demonstrate agreements? So Nicole, I think you went through that. So when you do an allocation amendment, don't all the members have to sign off on that? How does that work?
So for 17-18, I don't think we have that approval flow built in. So in that case, we'd still have to use your PDF version of your 17-18 CFAD and get signatures and upload that in the document repository. That's kind of how we're dealing with 1718, I believe moving forward we will have some sort of approval flow in the system.
So Ryan, I think is that correct? Because I think it's 1617 that we have the problem with. We do have 1718 in Nova, and so they could change those allocations, couldn't they? Ryan, are you there?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Sorry, I can speak to that. So the 1617 would be managed through the carryover input. For 1718, you can amend the allocations, but there is no approval flow associated with that. Both of those, that will die off as the years progress. For 1819, the new process will be consistent going forward to where if there is a change, members would need to approve within NOVA, all members.
Okay. So for this year, we'll have to somehow work out a process where all the members are aware of those changes. So Nicole, I think we'll have to work out that process.
Yeah. So I would recommend if you do have any 1718 allocation amendments, to please contact me, and we'll work with you to make sure we have that approval process in place and updated in NOVA.
Yeah, because we want to be transparent, so we don't want one member talking to another member and making changes without all the other members knowing. So we want to demonstrate, as Marianne said, agreement and transparency. So just work through our office with Nicole, and we'll make that happen for you. So let's see. Benita says, can a member initiate a budget revision within the total allocation of that member without having to do an allocation amendment? I think you're going to cover that in a little bit, right, Nicole?
Yes, but just quickly, so there's two things that will prompt a budget revision. There's allocation changes, which will prompt a budget revision for the members that are either receiving more money or less money. And then there's also the ability for members to revise their existing budgets. And that would also prompt a budget revision. For budget revisions that are less than 15% of the total, that does not require a consortia lead approval. But for budget revisions that are greater than 15%, the consortia lead will have to approve that budget revision.
Okay, and then Valentina asks, if we are the fiscal agent of the consortium and would like to allocate funds to a member, do we need to go through the allocation amendment process or develop an internal invoice system? So Valentina, the key here would be if your fiscal agent and the consortium member are one and the same, then that's an internal adjustment, because I guess if you're moving between object codes, you'd have to do a budget change in NOVA. And if it's like Nicole just said, if it's under 15%, then you can do that on your own. You don't have to require the lead's approval. But if the fiscal agent is a different member than your consortium member that you want to allocate funds, then you have to go through the allocation amendment process. So hopefully that makes sense. And then Jessica asks, if one member is putting unspent funds back into the pot to be distributed to other members, how do we indicate that without affecting the permanent allocation? So Nicole, that would be the allocation amendment process, right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, and that doesn't affect your permanent allocation. So let's say you start off with $1 million for the year and you do several allocation amendments throughout the year, and by the end of the year your allocation shows you're really at $600,000 because you moved money around. So when we look at the CFAD for prior year, we're going to go back to the $1 million, not that 600,000 or whatever adjustments you made during the year. So that's why we want to give you the flexibility throughout the year to make those changes without losing the prior year funding amount. And so hopefully that answers Jessica's questions. And Eileen says, in past years, 3 agencies have held consortium money. However, now members holding will change, so meaning the schedule for each agency will change from last year. Nicole, do you understand that?
Yeah, so I think I'm understanding Eileen's question to mean that they're going to have changes in their allocations because they're changing the agencies that will be holding the consortia level funds. So hopefully I'm understanding that correctly. And so you would just explain that in the changes box in the CFAD. You just need to explain who the money, what money moved to who, and why, and the rationale behind that.
Okay, and then Bronca says she could send Nicole, similar to what they did for 16-17, create a cover page of the CFAD or the allocations and have everybody sign off. That's fine. Just work that through Nicole, and she can process that. Where we have to document it. So, and then Veronica says from Lori Hayard, which money has to be spent within the 6 months if 16-17 can be carried over? Would that be 15-16? So 15-16 is closed out. That money went bye-bye. Most everybody spent all their 15-16 money. So what will happen is at the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, there will be carryover for unspent funds. There'll be the threshold will be at 60% of your carryover plus your new funds. So when we total up your 16-17 carryover and your 17-18 new funds that you got at the beginning of the year, you should be at 60% spent. If you're not, and you still have some 16-17 money left over, you'll have to do a corrective action plan explaining what happened. And then if the state is okay with that, we'll give you an additional 6 months to spend that down to the end of the year. That's 2.5 years, the normal process. But we are trying to, with the targets, get everybody to spend that money and don't hold on to it. So you can have the regular 2.5 years, but you have to do a corrective action plan. And if you keep doing corrective action plans, then you might become an ineffective member, which according to legislation could lead to you reducing your funds. So hopefully, so that means you would have an additional 6 months from June 30th to spend down the 16-17 money that you haven't spent, or liquidate your carryover. Solana, when do 16-17 funds need to be fully expended? So 16-17 funds should be liquidated by June 30th. With a corrective action plan, you can have till December 31st, but that corrective action plan puts you in corrective action plan status. So if you want to have that extra time, then you get put in corrective action plan status. If you keep doing that, then like I said, you could be with technical assistance if it doesn't work and you keep, having to do a corrective action plan every year, we'll deem you as an ineffective member, and your consortia can give your money to other members if they choose to. Debbie, budget revisions over 15% has to be approved by a consortia as a whole, or just the primary contact? Nicole, is that just the primary contact, correct?
Yes, correct. Just the primary contact.
Okay, thank you. And then Debbie or Deborah from San Diego, what is the process for creating a corrective action plan? So all it is when you're completing your Q4 or your quarterly expenditure report and you put in your expenses, and we have it flagged for at each quarter 15, 30, 45, 60. So it's Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And it takes into account all the active funding. So it'd be carryover plus any new funding. That's your total budget for the year. And you're supposed to, at Q1, have spent 15% of that total budget with all the carryover and new funding. At Q2, 30%, et cetera, et cetera. So if you don't meet that number, then you'll be required to fill out a box in NOVA, which is our corrective action plan saying, what happened and why aren't you spending your money according to the spending targets? And then we get notified. We'll set you up for technical assistance through AEBG TAP, and then they'll work with you. We'll work with you to get you back on track. We have some tools. There's some tools built into NOVA that we'll have available that will allow you to forecast and project your expenditures that might be helpful. And so we'll give you a variety of tools and TA to help you get back on track. If that doesn't work, then you risk becoming an ineffective member, and then you can have your funding reduced. Okay, so Veronica, if you could work with Kelly, her phone keeps dropping. Oh, are these requirements written somewhere? So the reduction of funds is in the legislation. And what else? The targets are on the website. Nicole, any other suggestions? I think we have this information on the website, and then we're basing the reduction in funds based on the legislation. I don't know, is there anything else I'm missing? Oh, we have a NOVA's users guide, right? Okay.
Yes, we do have a NOVA's user guide, and we will be updating that to account for all of these changes.
Yeah, and Kelly, the time frame and percentages, if you go to the AEBG website and click on AEBG or where's my funding, I think it's the first thing that pops up is the chart with the targets and the spending. And then Bronca says, am I correct to say that for each round of funding, the state allows 24 months to spend down? So for 16-17, it's July 1, 2016 to June 30th, 2018. So it's that date, July 1, 2016 to June 30th, 2018, without a corrective action plan. And then you can get another 6 months to December 31st, 2018 with a corrective action plan. So, and a corrective action plan is not bad. Let's say you bought a building and you had it all ready to go, and then all of a sudden the lease didn't get signed. There were delays. They found something in the building. You couldn't move in. So that huge invoice didn't get processed, and that resulted in you not meeting your expenditures. That happens a lot. And so that's reasonable. So things like that can happen. We work with you to give you that extra 6 months to spend that down. So, it's gonna be a case-by-case basis. And you have to do a good job explaining what happened. Kelly said, I thought we needed to be 60% with 16-17. Yes, that's at Q4. No, so Kelly, it's the active funding. So come June of this year, June 30th, 60% of all active funding. So any carryover, so let's say you have 16-17 carryover and you have 17-18 new funding, it's 60% of that total combined. So if you have $1 million of 16-17 carryover and $2 million of new funding, that's $3 million in active funding times 60%. So that should be what? 60% is 1.8 million out of 3 million. I don't know, something like that, or maybe more. But that would be the 60%, not on 16-17. It's on all active funding. And Veronica, thank you for posting that link. And Bronca says, our consortium members decided to be even more strict. They required that money be spent over 18 months. Okay. Well, good luck with that. I mean, we thought 24 months was tight. When will the certification button, as it was temporarily disabled as of yesterday? Does Nicole or Ryan know anything about that?
The CFAD certification button should still be working. So if you're having issues with your CFAD submission and approval, please contact me. What's been temporarily disabled is adding contacts at the member agency level. You're able to add a member representative through the CFAD process, but if you need to add just a member contact, that's been disabled until we get this new navigation up. So we can talk more offline if you wanted to contact me or put in a support request through AEBG TAP.
Okay, so let's move on to expense reporting, and then we'll catch up with questions. So we're still sticking with June 1st, member expense reporting and budget changes due, and that would be for getting caught up for this year, Q1, Q2, Q3. Consortium certification by June 30th. So if a member needs more time the consortia really has to certify by June 30th. We use June 1st as the deadline for the member, but the member and the consortia primary can work it out. We just care that everything gets certified by June 30th. So work with your members. You can use the June 1st date, but if they're having problems, you can work with them through your consortia certification process time up until June 30th. Also, August 15th, annual plans are due in NOVA for next year, 18-19. And then September 1st, you'll have your Q4 due, and that will include the end of the year financial reports. And those will be certified by the consortia by September 30th. Similar to that June 1st, you can work with members up until 30 days after to June 30th. So that Q4 due September 1st, you can work with your members up until September 30th to get that certified. And at the same time, September 30th, members also have their work plans and budget due at the end of September for 18-19 and any active funding, which would include carryover, 17-18, and possibly, hopefully not, 16-17 carryover with a corrective action plan. And then consortia have 30 days to approve that at the end of October. And then for 18-19 active funding expenses, Q1, that'll be due December 1st by members and then certified by the consortia by the end of December. So you can see it's going to be, with this quarterly expense reporting, you're always going to have something. It's kind of this cycle every 90 days. It'll cycle through, and then you have 90 days to certify, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see. So we're still working on the programming. We've kind of talked about this. Nicole talked about the 15% threshold. Targets. So we kind of talked about targets already. And so for Q4, which will be coming up soon, 60% of carryover of 16-17 and 17-18 new funds must be spent by Q4. So it's not just 16-17 carryover, it's the combined 17-18 and 16-17 carryover. So next year, it'll be 18-19 new funds combined with any carryover, and then you'll have to meet your targets for that. So that'll be, Q1 at 15, Q2 30, Q3 45, Q4 60. As we discussed, failure to meet the targets will result in a corrective action plan to continue to spend down your carryover funds from the prior year to the end of the year. You'll need to complete that plan and work with our office. So let's see. Here. So on corrective action, if a member files a corrective action plan, AEBG TAP will schedule the member for targeted technical assistance based on the state's recommendation. If TTA doesn't work, that's the reasonable intervention in the legislation. The member continues not to meet spending targets, meaning more corrective action plans, then the member may be deemed ineffective and the consortia can reduce their funds. Keep in mind, members that are holding consortia level funds will be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and we discussed this earlier in the webinar. Also, we have the end of the year report. We're still working on that programming, but we'll ask you to report any leverage resources, any fees you charged during the year. We'll talk about how did you meet the 5% cap for consortia level expenditures. We'll get a final expense report for Q4. We'll also certify any carryover that's being brought in, and we'll also have those corrective action plans filed for not meeting the targets. So before I bring Nicole in to cover the budget revision slides, let's see, Kristen says, so to clarify, for 17-18 funds should be used by June 30th, 2019, then under corrective action you can have until December 31st. Is that correct? Yes. So to clarify, it would be 17-18 funds. Correct. Yeah, that does make sense. Yes, Kristen, you are correct. When will the annual plan template be available? We'll talk about that at the end of the webinar. Clarification from Mia, is the 60% by consortia or member? It's all member related. So each individual member, because these are member budgets and member expense reporting, you will have to keep up with those spending targets. And because the legislation is clear on how we reduce members' funding, there's nothing in the legislation that says reduction of consortia funding. So this process is really geared towards members because we're allowed to do it under the legislation. When is Q4 due? Q4 is due September 1st. So Q4 ends June 30th, but we give you 60 days after to enter Q4 on September 1st. And then the consortia has 30 days to work with members to get that certified. And so the certification is due by September 30th, but the members should really get you the stuff by September 1st so you can review it during the month of September. And Heidi says, just confirming that expenditures automatically will be applied against the oldest funds first, right? So Ryan, we are tracking or showing a chart that shows first in, first out. Is that correct? Just waiting for Ryan to get on.
Not on Nova currently. Yeah, sorry, I had to unmute. Yes, so we will be managing the funds holistically, I guess if that's the way you want to describe it, but looking at the funds in aggregate and displaying and reporting it in aggregate on the Analytics tab. Again, not something that's being worked on, not currently available.
So Ryan, it will show, when you show expenditures, it'll show that you've spent down all your 16-17 money first rather than your 17-18 money.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah, when you're doing your fiscal reporting and inputting the expenditures, those expenditures will always decrement the oldest available funding year.
Okay, great. So Deheran says, just to confirm, the reduction of funding will be the whole consortium, just a member. According to the legislation, we can only do member reductions. We can't do consortia reductions. And then Jonathan asks, another way to understand the spending targets of 60% combined with carryover and new funds is to carry over no more than 40% to the next year. Thanks. Okay. Great. Thank you, Jonathan. So Nicole, do you want to cover budget revisions?
Yes, thanks, Neil. So the following screenshots will show you how to complete a budget revision in Nova. And again, this is not launched in Nova just yet. So these are some screenshots from our stage site. So once you're on the member agency page, scroll to the bottom of the page and click on the budget and work plan link. And once you navigate to the member budget and work plan section, click on budget, which is located on the left blue navigation pane. This screenshot shows the budget section where you will update your budget by object code to reflect any changes. And this is also where you can reflect any changes that occurred with your 16-17 allocations, which should be reflected in your carryover amounts. And in this example, the 17-18 allocation was changed, and as a result, the budget needs to be revised to reflect the allocation change. And once you have revised your budget, the amount listed under remaining amount should be 0. So this then indicates that your budget balances. And this is important to look at if you've had any allocation changes. You want to make sure that as you've revised your budget, that it then balances out back to 0. Okay, and now I'm going to show a preview on the expenditure reporting piece, and this will be available as of May 10th in Nova. So once you log into Nova, you would select AEBG under Funds, and then you click on Fiscal Reporting located on the left blue navigation pane. It would be the last button on the blue navigation pane on the left. This will bring you to the Fiscal Reporting dashboard, which is shown here. From here, you can scroll through the list to find your consortia, or you can use the filter at the top of the screen. And you can see in this view, each box shows the consortia listed and the members below it. And as reporting occurs, it does let you know who's completed the reporting and who hasn't. If it's in green, it means they've reported. If they're in red, it means that they have yet to submit their report. And you can also search for previously submitted reports by using the fiscal year and the quarter filters at the top of the screen. When you log in though, the default will direct you to the current reporting period, but you can use the filters at the top of the screen to look at prior reporting periods. Okay, so I'll move on to the next screen. Once you click on your consortia, it will direct you to this page where you will find all of your member agencies' quarterly reporting templates. In this screen, you will enter your expenditures, and this area will show where your expenditures land in relation to the established spending targets. If your expenditures fall below the spending targets, you'll be required to enter an explanation before the report can be submitted, and there's a box right below the expenditure area. And also before submission, you will also need to check the box that states, I have complied with the academic expenditure clause. This is located on the lower right-hand side of the screen. And that language is actually a link. And when you click on that, it will pull up a PDF document that basically displays what you're certifying to. And it's basically certifying that this report has been prepared in accordance with the applicable federal and state regulations, and that the information in this report is accurate to the best of your knowledge. So this is where you'll enter your expenditures. So moving into the next screen, this shows what it looks like when the member submits. So once the member agency submits their report, the text at the top right side of the reporting area will now change to submitted. And this report can also be unsubmitted by clicking on the gray button located below the submitted text. So we have developed functionality to submit and unsubmit, both at the member level and at the consortia level. This screenshot shows the final report template. This is just a preview of the final report template, which is similar to the Q3 report, but this does have some additional questions related to leverage funds and fees collected. So there's an area for you to enter the amount of funds that have been leveraged and to populate that with the funding sources, and also to indicate the amount of fees that were collected and to provide some details on that. And so this screen shows what it looks like when it's fully completed. So once all of the member reports are submitted, the consortia primary contact will be able to certify. The consortia primary contact only needs to certify once. So you would wait for all of the reports to come in, review them, and then you would certify. And this screenshot shows the expenditure reports that are certified at the consortia level. You'll notice that as the reports are submitted at the member level or certified at the consortia level, there is a gray button below that allows you to unsubmit or uncertify if you need to go back and make any changes. So that was just kind of a quick preview of the expenditure reporting piece. Again, it's still in development and it will be launched in Nova by May 10th.
All right, thanks, Nicole. There's a couple of questions I wanted to go back over. So Jonathan, I thought his was a statement, but it was a question. So Jonathan, you could say you carry no more than 40% to the next year, but you could go above that with a corrective action plan that would allow you to go over the 40%. But you're actually right. But with the corrective action plan, you could go more than 40%. And then Cecilia, well, it's actually, I think it's proved. But we distinguish 16-17 fund budget revision from 17-18. So it's a fiscal year budget, meaning a 12-month budget between July 1 and June 30th. So you don't distinguish that you're revising or amending this fund or that fund. You do a budget revision and you're revising that 12-month budget. Is that correct, Nicole? There's no way in the system that it shows that, oh, you're amending 16-17 or 17-18 funds, right? It just It's the one budget for that.
Yes, yes, that's correct. Because yes,
12 months.
yes.
Okay. And then Nicole, this one might be for you. Will revisions be reflected? Like, could other members or others looking at a member's budget, would they be able to see that a change was made?
Yeah, so Nova was built with transparency in mind, so everybody has view access to everything. And once a budget revision has been made, there will be some sort of timestamp and indication of the changes.
Okay, and then just a clarification, because Ryan's correct that the consortia lead certifies, but Cherish's question was, would consortia leads be certifying or would be member CBO be certifying? So the member CBO or whoever you choose that's going to check that box that Nicole talked about on the right side that says, I certify that these expenditures are, what was that terminology again, Nicole?
That you're certifying that they're in accordance, prepared in accordance with the applicable federal and state regulations, and that the information is accurate to the best of their knowledge.
So that is done at the member level when you submit your expenses. So it's just a semantics with the term certify. So when the member submits their budget, and their expenses, they're checking that box to say they are adhering to that statement Nicole just read. So that should be your CFO, your accounting person, your CBO that submits that and kind of certifies to that statement. Then the consortia lead does the final certification for the consortia, but they're looking at it from, is the expenses submitted, does it match the work plan that the member submitted earlier in the year and that we all agreed upon through the annual plan strategies and the 3-year plan vision. So yes, the consortia lead certifies, but each member will submit based on those the statement that Nicole just read about, I certify that these are accurate expenditures. So hopefully that makes sense. I know the terms get a little crazy and the titles and this and that, but we'll try to work through you. Can you go back and change? This is from Kathy in Ventura. Can you go back and change the budget at the expenditure time? So Nicole, when you're in the expenditure process, you want to do that budget change before you put in your expenditures, correct?
Yes, correct. They are two separate and distinct processes. So you'll want to complete your budget revision and then complete your expenditure report.
Right. And then, so the way that the sequence works, you do an allocation amendment if you choose to. That will lead to a budget change because if you're changing your allocations, that probably will change how you budgeted your amounts because you're getting new money or you're losing money. And then you'll have to do that budget change. And then once all that's cleared, you can report your expenses accurately. So you don't want to do your expenses first and then do an allocation change because that could screw everything up. I don't even know if the system would allow it. But there is a sequence, and we give you kind of 90 days when we get this all in place. So like Q1 is over, we give you 90 days to go through this process. So the first thing you'd want to do at the end of the quarter, look to see if there's any allocation amendments to do. And then once you process that, then you go through your budget changes to reflect those allocation amendments. And then once you do that, then you report those expenses based on those budget changes based on those allocation amendments. So that's kind of the sequence we're looking for. We give you 90 days to turn that around. And it's kind of a cycle we go through every quarter. Let's see. Jonathan says, is it possible to have a training version of Nova database to practice? It should speed up the learning the learning process. So Ryan or Nicole on PD or practice with Nova, any suggestions?
So one suggestion I would suggest is to contact us to be part of our beta testing group. We do have a group of users that we've had them go into the stage site and test things before their launch. So we always appreciate users to come test things. That's how we discover issues and kind of can learn how we can enhance the system.
All right. Ryan, anything to add?
Yeah, in addition, there is a YouTube channel that is set up. I don't know how many people have accessed it from this group, but it has a series of 1 to 2 minute instructional videos that will walk you through every single process. So that will also be in existence. I believe there's a link on the website to those videos.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Kristen asks, I know we've talked about this a bit, but are there guidelines for consortia leads on how to certify? What are we looking for? What would flag for not certifying? So we've done a couple of webinars on this. We have PowerPoint slides on consortia level administrative oversight. So we can post that again. So maybe Veronica could pull those slides or maybe that archived version of that webinar, and we could post that under this archive version of the webinars and maybe post that to the fiscal website, just so you, because we've done it a couple of times. And so really what we're trying to stress, the consortia level oversight is not about what the CFO or the CBO does at the member level. You should not be looking at timesheets. You should not be looking at invoices or purchase orders. That's not the consortia level's responsibility. It's really to look at, so you have your 3-year plan, and then you have your annual plan. And in your annual plan, you put strategies that are going to move you forward based on that 3-year planning vision, based on the annual plan of the money that you get every year. And then the member does a work plan. And in the member work plan, they list strategies that they're going to be doing using AEBG funds. So the consortia lead must look at those strategies and say, oh, so let's see, they're going to expand and build a new building. And then when the expenses come in, if there's no capital outlay or anything like that, you could say, hey, I thought you were going to renovate this building or get this building, expand services. I don't see any expenditures there. Or they said, we're going to expand program and hire 6 teachers. But then you see no expenses in instructional salaries. So it's those kind of things. Putting the plan, aligning it to the expenditures is the consortia director or lead's responsibility. So you're not checking on the actual expenses to see if an invoice was paid or a timesheet was posted. You're checking, do those expenditures align with the work plan that was submitted and the direction that the consortia wants to go to serve people in the region? So it's kind of a higher level. And hopefully that answers Kristen's question. Let's see, and then Debbie says, for June 1, will each quarter be reported separately or all together? Nicole, I think it's all, each will be reported separately. Is that correct?
Yes, so you're reporting quarterly on a quarterly basis, and but you're reporting expenditures to date in that quarter for that quarter.
Great, thank you. And then Joanna says, please clarify, are adult schools allowed to carry a reserve? If so, how much? Is 40% carry over the threshold? So we don't really allow a reserve anymore. You have 2 years with target spending to spend this money, 2.5 years with corrective action. If you don't spend it in the 2.5 years, we pull it back. So there's no reserves. And we did pull back some funding from 15-16, not a lot, but what it is we send the invoice to the district and ask for payment to the state, and it goes back to the general fund. So there is no ability to keep money in reserve unless you falsify it and say you spent it, and then you put it in reserve, and maybe your single audit could catch that. And 40% carry over the threshold. Well, you could go higher than that with the corrective action plan, but then that gives you the possibility of being an ineffective member if you abuse your corrective action plan status. So Ryan says expenditure reporting will be year to date, not actual quarterly expenses. So it'll be quarter 1, and then quarter 2 year to date, quarter 3 year to date, quarter 4 year to date. Nora, is there a deadline to submit a budget revision? So Nicole, the deadline to submit budget revisions would be the day before the expenditures. You submit your expenditures, something like that, because you have to do one
Yes,
before the other.
we don't have anything in the system that locks down budget revisions, but you would need to have it completed prior to reporting, prior to completing your expenditure report. So those are the steps. You need to do your budget revisions first and then your expenditure report.
Okay, and then Ryan posted the YouTube videos, and we're gonna, because we want to get to the annual plan. So annual plans, here we go. So I think we covered all questions. So consortia must submit by August 15th. It's based on your 3-year plan, your existing 3-year plan, which has been extended to June 30th of 2019. So you got an extra year on the 3-year plan. The process will be the same as last year's annual plan. You'll have an executive summary, you'll have strategies by objective, and you'll complete a small fiscal section at the end. It's streamlined. We'll take a look at it in a second. It's submitted by the consortia lead with consent of all members. So I believe, like last year, the consortium lead signs off saying that they've worked with all their members and they're on board. You don't have to run around and get signatures. I don't believe we have a sign off for the annual plan for all members, or do we, Ryan? How does the annual plan? I know it's in programming. Are we going to have a similar thing where all the members have to check the box, or can the consortia lead submit on behalf of all the members for the annual plan?
That is an excellent question. Let me get back to you. I don't remember off the top of my head, and I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. All right. So I think we would be okay with the consortia lead submitting, because August 15th, a lot of members are out of town, but we'll see what happens, and Ryan will get back to us. Annual plan will drive the member work plans and budgets, which are due in NOVA by September 30th, 2018. So your annual plan is due August 15th, and that's for the 18-19 year. And that'll cover, all the activities and strategies that you're going to be doing during the fiscal year from July 1, 2018 to June 30th, 2019. And then the members will work based on those strategies. They'll click the box in NOVA to say, I'm going to work on these 7 or 8 strategies, and here's my budget based on those strategies. And that's due September 30th in NOVA from the members. And then the leads certify those work plans and budgets by the end of October or 30 days after. Right. All right. And so here it is. Here's what it's going to look like. Executive summary, same as last year. We just changed the year. Meeting regional need. You'll have to answer that same question like you did last year. What are the primary gaps or needs in your region? How are you meeting adult ed need? So it's a need question. Then it goes on to gaps in service, or we added maintain established levels of service. And so you'd be looking for strategies for 18-19. So that would be kind of like, going into regions that don't have any adult ed, or increasing capacity, or maintaining those service levels. And that probably is the biggest one, because that's the operational costs. And then we have, of course, the other main areas of the AEBG program, the seamless transitions, strategies for the year, student acceleration, what are those strategies? Shared professional development, what are those strategies? And of course, leveraging resources, what are those strategies? And then you'll have another section called fiscal management. That's where we put in what we had in the CFAD, but because some people had already gone to their boards, we're going to repeat this. Please provide a narrative justifying how the planned allocations are consistent with the annual education plan, which is based on your 3-year plan. So you'll put that in there. And then the second question is, please describe your approach to incorporating remaining carryover funds from prior years into activities planned for 18-19. So we get the idea of what's happening with carryover funds, and then certification of submission, of course, and that's it. So let's quickly, we have like 10 minutes. Let's see if we have any questions. So Emma says, when do we get the annual plan template? So it'll be in Nova, and so they're still working on it. So you won't get a template, but you can preview it in Nova. And I think we're a little bit a ways from having that available, but we'll let everybody know once that comes up. And then Marianne says last year was only the lead who had to sign, so hopefully we can be consistent with that. Jan Shaw says, will there be a calendar so we can see and keep track of all the due dates? Yes, if you go on the AEBG website, and I think it's under resources, we have a calendar of due dates and deadlines, and that's up to date. Oh, and Veronica just listed it there. So Ryan answered some questions on annual plan approval. Have the same process as CFAD. Oh, all members will be required. Okay. Will be available before May 10th date. So that's for Emma, if you wanted to take a look at it. Okay, so here's an update on 3-year plans. 3-year plans will be entered into Nova, just like everything else. We'll have training and reports out on the 3-year planning guidance process. We have a few webinars that we've already done. We did a human-centered design, which is a process tool to help you with the planning. That was just last week. We did community asset mapping back in February. We've archived that. That is part of the planning process as well. We have the field teams working on some white papers and related to planning and consortium member effectiveness. As soon as those become available, we'll release that. I think in the newsletter coming out next week, we'll have a couple of reports on measurement and metrics, and another one on what other states are doing to look at member and regional effectiveness. Performance definitely will be part of the next 3-year plan. I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but that'll come out of that field team process. And we do have some consortia right now participating in the human-centered design pilots, and we'll expand that hopefully in the fall. So look for more information over the next few months and into the fall related to the 3-year planning process. And I think so those 3-year plans will be due in late May or early June of next year. I think we'll have something in Nova for you to look at probably maybe by the end of the year, just to give you an idea what you'll be required to complete. I think it'll be similar to the past 3-year planning template, but we probably will add something in there about performance targets, and we'll see where we end up with that as it's a work in progress with the field teams. So with that, we have 7 minutes left. Let's see if we have any questions. Did we stun everybody with that wealth of information? And Veronica has posted the archive webinars. Of course, there's always AEBG TAP that you can contact for help on finding past webinars related to planning, or finding YouTube videos, or finding information on the website related to fiscal reporting, or setting up some specific technical assistance for a member that maybe is not getting it. They're available as well. So with that, we have a few questions, or you can call us. There you go. 888-827-2324. Call now. 888-827-2324. So many ways to get assistance. I know this was a lot of information we threw at you today, and a lot of deadlines and due dates, but all this information is posted on the website, and Nicole and Ryan are very accommodating. So if you do have questions, as you know, we follow up very quickly. We're very responsive to your emails as well as AEBG TAP. So there can be a lot of hand-holding here as June 1st approaches, and we will make sure we walk you through this process, as this will be the first time you're reporting expenses into Nova. It should go as smoothly as you did with the work plans and budgets, and we look forward to helping you out in that process. Okay, thank you. And Nicole or Ryan, any final comments? I think everybody is just exhausted and thankful, of course.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being. Yeah, thanks everyone for being on the line. And I want to thank AEBG TAP and Veronica and Holly and Daryl as always for helping us navigate all the support requests that come in and helping us get the webinar set up. And thanks to everyone for being on the line and for all your questions.
All right. Ryan, any parting comments, previews, sneak peeks?
No, I'd just say more to come. A lot of balls in the air right now as far as new development and enhancement coming to NOVA and AEBG, so stay tuned, and yeah, more to come. Thanks for joining, and as Neil said, we're here to help and answer any questions. Please let us know.
All right. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Nicole and Veronica and the AEBG TAP crew behind the scenes. It was Daryl was helping out today behind the scenes. So the next webinar I think we have is in May. We're going to go into late May. So that'll be kind of a webinar that we will probably have launched the expenditure reporting. And so that'll be about 12 days from the member deadline, and we can walk everybody through specifically the expense reporting and maybe the budget changing process again. And so don't despair. We will be back in about 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, to walk you through the expenditure reporting process and get you ready to go on your summer break by fulfilling all your obligations. We'll also probably cover the annual plan process as well. But as you saw, it's not much different than the prior year. And so it's actually a lot streamlined, and so it should be easy for you to complete. So thanks again, everyone, and we look forward to talking to you soon and responding to all your questions. Have a great weekend, and thank you very much. And Veronica has one last comment to make before we close out.
Yes, thank you, Neil. The next webinar on Tuesday, we will have one last webinar with CASAS before the quarterly data submission. So if you have any questions that you would like to get answers to, please be sure to join us on Tuesday at 12 o'clock noon. I posted a link to register for that webinar. Also, once I close this meeting, the evaluation will appear. Please be sure to fill out this evaluation to let Nicole, Neil, and Ryan know what you thought of this webinar and any professional development and technical assistance you may need at this time. Thank you all and have a great weekend.